I think there's also a big part of it, and I know we know this is not a favorite topic of people's, but vulnerability, right? Like I remember myself in positions where I had hundreds of people under my umbrella, and I remember like the old me was one, and you can attest to this, right? The old me was like Julie outside of work is Julie outside of work, Julie inside of work is Julie inside of work, and never the two shall meet. You don't get to know where I live. You don't get to know my personal business. You don't get to know if I'm dating someone. You don't get to know nothing. Nothing. You don't get to know these things. You don't get to know when my birthday is. Like you don't get to know these things, right? My maintenance guys, which I don't know if you know the story, but one of our old maintenance guys, like sometime after my birthday, is like, "Hey, you just had a birthday recently, didn't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." Wasn't even in my area. He was maintenance for a different area. It was like, "You just had a birthday, right?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, well, I noticed that you just have the month and the day on your Facebook. You don't have the year on there." I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, so how old are you?" I'm like, "If I wanted you to know, I'd put it on Facebook." Because obviously you've already been checking things out, right? Like,
That's a
why?
Julie
Why?
response.
That's a Julie response, right? For sure. For sure. But it's like back then, and I don't know if this was because I was relatively young for the position that I was in. So I don't know if this was some kind of like complex of, I mean, it was a lot of things, right? It was we keep work and home life separate. But then there's also an element of like, I'm a woman in a man's world. I feel like I have to prove myself. And there's also this element of people have this perception that age matters. You have to be a specific age to have the wisdom and experience and the da 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 whatever to do the thing well, right? Like, well, that's a bullshit. That was bullshit because obviously they put me in that position, clearly knowing how old I was, right? So it's fun and it's interesting, but it's also like the people that I opened up to and the people that I was vulnerable with, I'm still close to those people to this day. The other people, nah, it's just no, right? But I think that's also this interesting thing that we've both been able to develop on this journey of self-discovery and self-leadership is like being vulnerable and what it takes to be vulnerable and what that actually means